It's been far too long, but we are finally back with another Blu-ray collection update. What's up everybody, your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and if you've been following the channel for a little while, you may have seen some videos that I've done going over my Blu-ray collection step by step. And what I mean by that is I have a video out where I went over all of the movies in my collection that start with numbers, and then all the movies that start with the letter A. And today, we are going to go to the next letter in the alphabet and go over all of the Blu-rays that I have in my collection that start with the letter B. Now, I know this is probably an unorthodox way to be doing this, and you're probably thinking, well, why don't I just go over my entire collection at once? Well, that's because there are hundreds of movies in my collection, and it would take forever to go over all of them. And also, I don't want to just go through the movies one by one and not really say anything about them, so what I've been doing is going back and watching all of my movies, and now that they're kind of fresh in my mind, I'm able to talk to you a little bit about them. So, I've got a stack right over here just off camera. Let's go ahead and go through every movie in my collection that starts with the letter B. And if there are any movies that you think I need to add to my collection, definitely let me know in the comments below, because this is going to be a reoccurring thing. Once I get through the alphabet, I'm going to start right back over again with new movies. Okay, here we go. First up on the list is a movie called Baby Driver. So Baby Driver is written and directed by Edgar Wright. He is the guy that also directed the Shaun of the Dead movie, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End. Or is it just, I think it's just called World's End, or The World's End. Anyway, he's done all of those movies and is a really great writer-director, and this is a fantastic action-packed film. You have Ansel Elgort, I think is how you pronounce his name. He was most recently in the Steven Spielberg remake of West Side Story. He was pretty good in that too. Of course, you also have Kevin Spacey in what I think was one of the last movies he did before he ended up getting kind of axed from Hollywood. There's also Jon Hamm and Jamie Foxx, who are also spectacular in this movie. Just a really fun, action-packed movie with a really killer soundtrack, so check that out if you get a chance. All right, next up on the list is the Back to the Future trilogy. So I have this on 4K, of course. This is an absolute classic series of movies that I love and have loved since I was a little kid, and it looks spectacular on 4K. It also has a ton of special features in this collection, so I definitely recommend picking this one up. In fact, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead, and this is gonna probably take me a while, but I'm gonna list every single movie in this collection video in the description below with the best prices. So if you want to go ahead and use those links, it does help out the channel. Doesn't cost you anything extra though. But of course, what is any collection without the Back to the Future trilogy? You gotta have it, and this is definitely the way to pick it up. All right, next up we have a Disney classic, and that is Bambi. Now, I am not a massive old school Disney fan. However, these movies are ones that I kind of grew up with, and I feel like for me, I don't know why, but I have to collect all of the Disney movies that I can. I'm kind of the same way with comic book movies. Even though there are plenty of comic book movies that I do not like at all, I just have to own them all. So of course I had to grab Bambi, even though it's not one of my favorites, and it's also a very traumatizing movie, I think, for little kids, but we have it here on Blu-ray. Next up is a series of movies. I'm just gonna grab all four here, and that is the 1980s and 90s Batman quadrilogy, I guess. You have, of course, the original 1989 Batman, which is, I mean, one of, if not my favorite Batman movie of all time. I mean, there have been more recent ones that I think are very, very good. Of course, The Dark Knight, the new Batman movie is really good, but this one just has a special place in my heart. Of course, Jack Nicholson as the Joker absolutely crushes it, and Michael Keaton as Batman. You know, when he was cast as Batman in this role, a lot of people doubted him because he had only done really a lot of comedic work up to that point, but he absolutely kills it as Bruce Wayne and Batman, playing both sides of that personality. And then, of course, Michael Keaton would return in Batman Returns in 1991, I think? Was this one in 91? I think so. Of course, you also have Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, who is perfect. And of course, Danny DeVito playing a super creepy penguin in this movie. This is one of those things where it is a movie aimed at young people, but he is horrifying, and I could definitely see this kind of teetering on the edge of rated R, maybe nowadays if it were to come out. But either way, a fantastic sequel. Absolutely love this movie. I don't know if I like it as much as the original, but it's pretty close. And then it kind of starts to go a little downhill. You have, of course, Batman Forever, where, of course, Val Kilmer takes over as Batman, and he is, I don't know. I do like Val Kilmer a lot, and I think he did well in parts, but it really just felt like he was kind of phoning it in. If you go back and watch this movie, he's just kind of not there, it seems. And then of course you also have Jim Carrey playing the Riddler, who didn't really seem like a Riddler, really felt more like a Joker type character. And then Tommy Lee Jones playing Two-Face, who this is just a weird movie. I don't think it's the worst Batman movie. That is coming up next, but it's definitely by no means a good one. And although I did watch it when it first came out when I was a little kid, and I enjoyed it then because I was a little kid, watching this now, going back and looking at this, it's not great. I'll just say that. And then, of course, it all goes to crap with Batman and Robin. Now we have George Clooney coming in and playing Batman and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. This is another funny one where when I was a kid and I watched this, I actually really liked this movie. And going back, I bought this and went back and watched this movie. I haven't seen it in many, many years prior to that. And I was like, oh, it's probably going to be silly and I'm probably still going to enjoy it because I'm going to have that nostalgia. No, it's just a bad movie. It's just really bad and not in a good way, which is really unfortunate. But I had to get the whole collection, so there it is, Batman and Robin. Probably the worst Batman movie we've ever seen. Hopefully it will remain that way and we will not get another Batman movie worse than this. All right, now we're gonna get into some other Batman movies. I have a lot of Batman movies, I just realized here. This one is Batman Beyond: The Return of the Joker, which is based on, of course, Batman Beyond, the animated series, and this is a fantastic animated movie. There are a number of Batman movies, animated movies, that are really great, and this is certainly atop the charts for me. I suppose I don't want to spoil too much about what the plot is here, but this is obviously taking place far into the future. Bruce Wayne is much older. If you haven't seen Batman Beyond, you absolutely have to see that series. It's fantastic. But the Joker returns after seemingly being dead for decades, and we get to see how he interacts with Terry McGinnis and now a much older Bruce Wayne, and we get a lot of backstory there. It's a really cool movie with like some really adult themes, even though of course the series itself was aimed more at kids. This is just a fantastically done film. And then next up we have Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which is not as bad as I remember it being. I remember watching this in theaters and just being really turned off at a lot of it, but it does have some great moments throughout this movie. There's of course the scene in the warehouse with Batman. There's of course Batman fighting Superman. Wonder Woman has some fantastic scenes. There's some really cool like themes that are going on under the surface, but at the end of the day, it kind of just falls apart under its own weight. They tried to do, I feel like, way too much with this movie. And of course you had a terrible Lex Luthor in this. I don't know what they were thinking, but Batman v Superman, I had to buy it, of course, and it's just really, it's okay. It's an okay movie, and probably something that I would go back and watch different scenes from, but probably wouldn't watch the whole movie again anytime soon. Now, next up, another animated, actually an animated double feature here. One of them is definitely more popular than the other, but they're both really good, and that is Batman Mask of the Phantasm and Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, which, of course, Mask of the Phantasm is one of the best Batman movies of all time. It was, I think, the first animated Batman movie to be released in theaters, and it is a fantastic story. It is really, really well done. The Mr. Freeze, or I guess SubZero story, Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero, is also really good. It goes into the tragedy of Mr. Freeze's past. Mr. Freeze's? Is that how you would say it? But Mr. Freeze's past and with his wife and everything like that. So it's a really good story. Of course, Mask of the Phantasm, I think, overshadows it, but still, a great double feature to pick up. All right, next up, we have a couple more animated Batman movies. This one here is a bit of a twofer. You have The Dark Knight Returns Deluxe Edition, which of course has part 1 and part 2. I think part 2 is the one that's the more popular of the two, but either way, this has the story that is based on the comic book of the same name, The Dark Knight Returns, which is a great comic book. I actually have that over on my bookshelf as well. And this is what a lot of Batman v Superman was kind of based on. I don't know if you remember, but there was a Comic-Con panel that they had where Zack Snyder came on stage and he read an excerpt from The Dark Knight Returns and kind of like giving a hint as to what Batman v Superman was going to be about. And of course, this is the animated version of that comic book, and it is amazing. This is such a good movie, or I guess pair of movies, really. So I absolutely recommend you check this out. If you're a Batman fan and you have not seen The Dark Knight Returns, you are doing yourself a disservice. This is far and away one of, if not the best Batman story ever told, and this movie is a great telling of that. So definitely recommend you check out The Dark Knight Returns on Blu-ray if you get a chance. And last up, the last animated Batman movie that I have here is Batman Under the Red Hood. Now this is a really cool story. Also, this is a movie that was recommended to me by my mom, oddly enough. My mom is not a comic book fan by any means, but I think she was scrolling through Netflix one day and saw that this was on there and hit me up and was like, hey, have you seen this Batman Red Hood movie? And funnily enough, I didn't even know it was on there, so I checked it out, and it is a great story, kind of reminiscent to the Batman Return of the Joker movie that we talked about a little bit ago. This is kind of a similar story in some ways, but either way, it is very, very well done. Really cool animation and fight scenes in here, and a great reveal at the end. I feel like it's less of a shocking reveal now because everybody kind of knows who the Red Hood is, but at the time, if you didn't know, this was a great way to find out. So Batman Under the Red Hood, recommend you check that out for sure. And the last Batman movie that I have here is the most recent The Batman, which is an absolutely amazing Batman story. This is, I guess they call it like a year 2 story. So if you're familiar with Batman, they have year 1 Batman, which is kind of when he first puts on the cape and cowl and starts fighting crime and he really doesn't know what he's doing. This is kind of year 2, which is when he has kind of come into his own as Batman, but hasn't really found a balance between Batman and Bruce Wayne. So he's really just obsessed with fighting crime and justice and all of that in a very unhealthy way. And I know there was a lot of chatter about Robert Pattinson taking over as Batman, but I think he was tremendous in this. He did a fantastic job. Also, Zoe Kravitz was really good as Catwoman. I had seen her in a couple movies previously, and I always thought she was kind of like, you know, whatever, didn't really do anything to blow me away, but I thought she was really good in this movie. Really not a weak link that I can think of at all. So this is a tremendous movie. I can't wait to see what else they do as far as where they take it from here. I love the vibe of the world of Gotham that they built. It is super dark, but I feel like that's kind of what you need when you're building up this Batman story. You have to come from a place where everything kind of sucks, and then hopefully it gets better from there. And I think they absolutely nailed that here. It honestly really reminds me of Seven. I don't know if you've seen Seven, but Seven is a movie with Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, and Kevin Spacey, oddly enough, playing Psycho. But this movie reminds me so much of that world that they built in Seven, where it's just a horrible, hopeless, really screwed up world, and then you have a detective who's trying to bring some sort of justice to it, and that is exactly what this is. So it's almost as if Seven is a prequel to this. I don't know. That's just kind of my headcanon about it. But yeah, The Batman, a fantastic movie, worthy of being considered one of the best Batman movies, period. So now we go from one of the best movies in my collection here to, without a doubt, one of, if not the worst movie in my entire movie collection. And that is Battlefield Earth. Oh yes, of course I have Battlefield Earth. What kind of collection would this be if I didn't have the worst movie ever made, or at least one of the worst movies ever made? So for those that are not familiar with Battlefield Earth, first off, I will say this was actually hard to find. I think I had to get this off of like eBay. It's a random clip book DVD case. And this movie has John Travolta in the lead. It was based on an L. Ron Hubbard story, I believe, a book that he wrote. And if you're not familiar with him, look him up. He is a very interesting individual, to say the least. And they put a bunch of money into this movie, and it is horrible. It is so bad. It's one of those movies that you put on and just laugh and just ask yourself, how in the world did this get made? Like, how did so many people look at the script, look at the production, go through the whole process, edit the movie, and think, yeah, we'll put this out? No, it is so bad. You also have Barry Pepper in here. I don't know if you can see him right there, but that's Barry Pepper. He was in Saving Private Ryan. He played a sniper and is just like this total badass in that movie. And then he did this, which is one of, if not the worst movie ever made. And yet, oddly enough, I do recommend you watch it because it's just so fun. And I think I saw that it's actually available on Blu-ray now, so I'm gonna try to hunt down a Blu-ray copy because this just has to be in your collection. All right, next up, I'm gonna try to move a little bit quicker through here, but next up we have A Beautiful Mind, which is Russell Crowe playing a mathematician who is also schizophrenic, and he is really great in this movie. I was actually talking to a friend yesterday about schizophrenia. They work as a psychologist, and we were talking about how with schizophrenia, oftentimes there's not a lot that you can do for somebody with that condition, and how Russell Crowe's character in this just kind of accepted that some of the things that he was seeing in his world were not real and was able to live his life with relative normalcy despite having visions of people around him and things around him that were just not real, that were not really there. So a really interesting movie, and it really plays with your perception of what's going on and what's real, what's not real. So definitely recommend you check that one out. Next up is another Disney movie, and that is Beauty and the Beast. Now, I do not have the live action Beauty and the Beast because, to be honest, I didn't really like it all that much, and this is just way, way better. And although I wouldn't say Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, it's definitely one that is an absolute classic that you have to add to the collection. So I've got it here. All right, we're moving quickly here. Next up is kind of a silly movie, but that's Beer Fest. So this is made by the same guy or the same team, I guess, that did Super Troopers and all those movies. And it's just a movie about a group of dumb friends that go to Germany to enter a beer drinking competition. It's completely ridiculous, but a fun movie nonetheless. All right, next up on 4K, it is spoopy season, and we have, of course, Beetlejuice on 4K Blu-ray. This is a great movie. Another Michael Keaton joint. You know, we saw him as Batman earlier here in the collection, and this is another movie where he absolutely crushes it. Such an over-the-top character, and definitely kind of a jerk in this movie, but a lovable jerk. And I've heard that they're supposed to be making a sequel at some point in the not-too-distant future, so I will absolutely be checking that out whenever it comes out. But for now, Beetlejuice on 4K. All right, next up is a trilogy, and that is my Criterion collection of the Before Trilogy. Now, if you're not familiar with the Before Trilogy, this is a Richard Linklater set of films that follows Ethan Hawke and I forget her name. Oh, Julie Delpy. Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke, and it's a really cool concept. So we've got all three movies here. There's Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. And it follows their relationship over decades. So in the first movie, they're in, I think, their early 20s, this couple, and they meet in Europe while he's, I think, backpacking. Then in the second movie, you jump 10 years later where they haven't seen each other for 10 years and they kind of reconnect. And then the final movie is 10 years after that, where they've now been in a relationship for the past 10 years, and it's kind of like the difficulties of their relationship. So it's like a really cool slice of life set of movies, but it is some of the most authentic human communication that I think I've seen, just period. It's so realistic, a lot of the conversations that they have in this, and it's also just a really cool concept to jump back into the lives of these people decade after decade. So a really great concept, and of course Criterion Collection always crushes it with their bundles and their box sets. So definitely recommend you check this out if you get a chance. If you're just into kind of like those human condition type movies where you're just jumping into someone's life for a period of time. Really, really cool. And next up here is another kind of special edition box set, and that is a movie called Belle, which is an anime movie by one of my favorite anime directors. Now, I don't think this is necessarily his best work, but it is an absolutely gorgeous movie. And this is like the collector's edition that comes with all this extra content and a book and a poster and all that stuff and like a hard shell case. But this movie is basically kind of like Beauty and the Beast in virtual reality. Kind of? I don't know. It's a weird movie, but it is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And it's one of my favorite anime directors, so even though I don't think the movie itself, some of the writing is a little even though I'm not a huge fan of the writing of this movie, I had to pick it up because I love this guy's work, and this is such a cool box set, how could I not? And there's so many cool special features on this. I was diving through that and watching like all the making of. They go into not only the like dubbing process where they cast this young girl to be the main character in this, who's an incredible singer, but they go into also a lot of the production in the Japanese side of the animators and things like that. So really cool if you're into anime, you want to see kind of like the behind the scenes of all of it. This is a really cool collector's edition. Okay, we are about halfway through. Next up on the list is Big Hero 6, which is just a really fun, action-packed, family, kind of young animated movie that has a really lovable robot that you just get such a kick out of, and it's just a good time. So nothing really crazy or special about this movie other than the fact that it's just really fun and, you know, really well animated. Next up on the list is The Big Lebowski. Now, The Big Lebowski is a movie that I did not watch until much, much later than I feel like I should have. This is a movie that's been around for over 20 years at this point, and I had not seen it up until just a few years ago, and it is fantastic. It's definitely a cult classic, and this is probably the best Jeff Bridges and John Goodman movie that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, John Goodman and Jeff Bridges have both been in a ton of movies and some fantastic films, but this one is just so good and so fun to watch. If you haven't had a chance to see The Big Lebowski, I definitely recommend you check it out. Don't do like I did and wait too long to watch it. It may not be for you, but if it is, this will become quickly one of your favorite movies of all time. All right, next up, we have a bit of a trilogy here. We have Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Collection. So this is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure as well as Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And then, of course, I picked up Bill and Ted Face the Music, which is the long-awaited sequel to that, well, I guess conclusion to the trilogy. And all of these movies are so much fun to watch. You have Keanu Reeves, Alex Winter. They are completely lovable idiots. And this is one of those rare instances where they will come out with a sequel to a movie decades later, and it's actually pretty good. Honestly, I feel like it's on par with the original two movies. They were able to bring back, of course, Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, and as well as a few others. The person who plays Death, I forget his name. He's a great actor, but he comes back as well. And then you have two young actresses. I don't remember their names, but they play Bill and Ted's daughters, and they are kind of like young versions of Bill and Ted, but maybe not quite as dumb, I guess. But either way, everybody in this movie is so lovable. It's so ridiculous and over the top and just a good time. So definitely a few of my favorite just dumb movies. I feel like that's a category of film, right? You have movies like Bill and Ted or Dumb and Dumber or Dude, Where's My Car, where it's just like you're following a couple of idiot protagonists, but they're just so lovable. And this definitely falls into that category. I feel like I should do a top 5 favorite dumb movies. I don't know. Maybe I should do something like that. Let me know if you think that's a good idea. All right, next up, a little more serious, I think, than Bill and Ted, and that is Black Hawk Down. So Black Hawk Down is a Ridley Scott war movie that has won, a ton of awards and been incredibly highly rated. It's kind of a hard movie to watch at times, so I don't know if this is one that I would go back and watch over and over again, but it is an absolute classic and probably one of the best representations of war, I think, in film, at least from my perspective. I've never been in war, so I can't really say, but just from what I've seen, this is exceptionally well done. And next up on the list, we have Black Panther. Now, Black Panther 2 is going to be coming out pretty soon, and unfortunately, of course, we don't have Chadwick Boseman reprising his role. I loved everything about this movie. I thought it was gorgeously shot. The music was incredible. The story was really cool. It was a really interesting story about, you don't really know who is in the right or in the wrong, whether Wakanda is doing the right thing by remaining secluded, or if Killmonger has, he kind of has a point with a lot of what he's trying to do. So I really like when you have a villain that is not just so black and white as far as, oh, this is a bad guy doing bad things, but like he actually has a reason for what he's doing, and it kind of makes sense. So this was a very well done movie, just all around. Of course, Ryan Coogler directed it, who has become an amazing director. And this is definitely one of the most rewatchable, I think, Marvel movies that I can think of off the top of my head. I love going back and watching this because it's absolutely just a gorgeous movie to check out. All right, and next up here we have, oh my gosh, the Blade trilogy. Now, hear me out. I love the Blade movies. I know they are completely ridiculous and over the top, and Wesley Snipes is a little crazy, but the first movie, you gotta go back to the 90s, right? This was before X-Men, before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, before any of this stuff. So you really gotta have to look at it from the perspective of the time that it came out, and this was awesome. This movie kicks so much butt, especially the first one. The second one's okay. The third one is super cheesy, but in a good way. You have Ryan Reynolds in it, who really kind of lightens up the movie a lot. But yeah, I absolutely love the Blade trilogy. I don't know what's going on with the reboot that they've been working on with Mahershala Ali. I was excited to see him kind of take over the role, but apparently that script kind of fell through. So we'll see what happens there. But either way, Blade trilogy, if you are a child of the 90s and grew up on this in the dark times when there were hardly any comic book movies coming out, you know you love this movie. And this one, or really all three of these movies, and this is, it has a special place in my heart, to say the least. All right, we're getting there, guys. Next up is Blade Runner. I have the final cut here. And then, of course, Blade Runner 2049, which was a great sequel and an absolutely stunning movie. Holy cow. Having this on 4K Blu-ray, I have an OLED TV. Watching it on that is just absolutely stunning. Every single scene, you can just pause it. It is like wallpaper worthy. Now, I know these movies are a little kind of heady and they may not be your type of movie, depending on what you're looking for, but I think that they are just so spectacularly well done. Harrison Ford is fantastic, and these are really, especially this one, is, a godfather to so much modern sci-fi that we get nowadays. So if you haven't seen the original Blade Runner and you consider yourself a fan of sci-fi, you have to see it. This is required watching if you're a sci-fi fan. And then of course the sequel I thought was really, really well done. Ryan Gosling is very good in this role. I'm kind of hit and miss with Ryan Gosling. I feel like he's a really good actor, but I also feel like a lot of his roles that he does are kind of one note. But in this particular movie, Blade Runner 2049, that just really works for his character. So, love both of these, definitely recommend them. Next up on the list is maybe not quite as good of a movie. In fact, okay, this is a double pack, but I'm only going to consider the one that starts with the letter B, and that is Bloodsport. Now, I also have Time Cop in here, but we're not on the T's yet, okay? Bloodsport is a movie that is, how do I say this? Not good, but it holds a special place in my heart because it's a movie that I used to watch with my dad when I was a kid. I don't know if I should have been watching it, but whatever. We watched all of these like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal movies, and of course Bruce Lee. And so, you know, I had to own it. It's just a special memory for me. I don't think it's a particularly good movie. And in fact, for those who don't know, Bloodsport is based on a real person who, I don't think actually did the things that they mention in this movie. It's actually really funny because this is supposed to be based on a true story, but it turns out the guy that it's based on was kind of a crazy person and made up a bunch of things that are just not true. Like he talked about being in, I think it was like 300 kumites, and he was undefeated, and like, you know, he once killed a man by breathing on him. I don't think that's not part of it, but like just weird stuff. So it's a silly movie. Jean-Claude Van Damme is very new to acting in this, so maybe his skills aren't quite up to par, but you know, it's just a fun action 80s movie with some pretty decent fight scenes. And then of course Time Cop we'll get to another time when we get to the T's in our collection of videos. All right, next up on the list is, oh man, I love this movie. This is Martin Lawrence in Blue Streak. Blue Streak is a movie where he plays a jewel thief who gets busted on a job and has to hide the diamond. So he hides it in this building that's under construction, and then he gets locked away for a few years, gets out of prison finally, serves his time, and it turns out that the building that he hid the diamond in is now a police office, what do you call that? A police precinct. So he has to pretend to be a cop in order to get into the building to find the diamond that he had left behind. And this movie is hilarious. I love 90s Martin Lawrence. You also have Dave Chappelle in here. A young Dave Chappelle plays kind of like almost like this sidekick character to Martin Lawrence, and he is fantastic. There's so many hilarious moments in this movie. I absolutely love it. So Blue Streak, if you haven't seen it, if you're a kid of the 90s, you got to check this one out. And next up on the list, we have another collection here. This is the Bourne Complete Collection. So this is all 5 Jason Bourne movies, or I guess 4 of them are Jason Bourne movies, and the 5th one is not, because it's not Jason Bourne, but it's a Bourne World movie. So of course you have the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne Ultimatum, the Bourne Legacy, which is the one with Jeremy Renner, and Jason Bourne. And these movies are, it's hard to say, right? They're kind of a product of their time, or at least the first one is. I actually really like the first one, and maybe even the second one, but they kind of fall off from there because they just become like really formulaic. And although each movie does have good parts about it, it kind of gets old after the first couple. So, you know, I just picked up the whole collection because it was pretty inexpensive. So I thought if I'm going to go ahead and buy a couple, I might as well just get them all. And so that's what I did. So the Bourne Complete Collection, if you're into that kind of Mission Impossible, spy, action, thriller type movies, I would definitely recommend at least checking out the first one, because the first one I think is really, really good. But, you know, if you are going to pick up that, you might as well just get the rest of them. Okay, up next is another anime movie from the same director that I had talked about earlier, the one who had worked on Belle. That is Mamoru Hosoda, if you don't know. This is probably my favorite movie of his. It's called The Boy and the Beast. This, I think, is much, much better than Belle. It's a great story. It's very well animated, and it's just it's a good story about a young boy who is really troubled, and he kind of runs away and finds this beast that you see here, who is a martial artist that kind of like teaches him how to become more disciplined in martial arts, but also the boy is teaching him. It's a really cool story, and just a really sweet, heartfelt story. A little cheesy at times. That's, I feel like, something that happens a lot when you translate anime movies over to English. There's a lot of a way that people in Japanese culture communicate that doesn't quite mirror over to American culture. So there are definitely some cheesy moments and lines throughout the movie, but overall, I think it is an exceptional movie. So if you're looking for a really cool and action-packed, but also a really great like family story that's going to tug at your heartstrings, check out The Boy and the Beast. It is really great. All right, next up we have another Disney movie, and that is Brave. Now, Brave is one of the Disney movies that I feel kind of flew under the radar. I know, of course, no Disney movie ever really does fly under the radar, but I remember this came out, I feel like it was around the same time as Frozen, or not far from it. And of course, Frozen was monstrously successful, but I like this movie more. I think this movie is better. It's also one of, if not, it might be the only, this might be the only Disney movie in which the princess is not interested in a male like love interest. I guess Frozen is also the same way because Elsa's not really, you know, interested romantically in anyone, but this might have been the first one to do it because every other Disney princess that I could think of prior to this, you know, obviously is like falling in love with some prince or some street rat in the case of Aladdin, but this is probably the first time where it was like, no, this is just a movie about her and her dealing with her family, and it's fantastic. So I really dig Brave. I think it's a really, really good movie, and one of my favorite more modern Disney movies, I think. All right, after Brave, of course, we have Braveheart, which follows another Scottish person. Yeah, she's Scottish, right? Oh, that's kind of cool. We have Brave and Braveheart. Braveheart, of course, with Mel Gibson. This movie, I mean, it won a bunch of Academy Awards, and it's a really, really well done movie. I'm not sure. I watched it again recently, and I don't know. There was a lot of it that just felt kind of like it dragged on a little bit, and I would say it also felt a little unoriginal at times, but that's something that I have to like go back and put myself in the mindset of the time that it came out, right? Because you can say a movie, you know, like you'll watch a movie now and be like, oh, that's so like unoriginal, like, or it's been done a million times. It's like, yeah, it probably has, but at the time that this came out, had this been done so much, or is it something that this kind of like led the way on? So Braveheart, still a really great movie, probably hindered by the fact that there's so many other epics that have come out since it, and so you kind of see a lot of the same formulas throughout it, but still really great. I really enjoy it. All right, next up is a movie that I actually have not seen yet. I had to buy it though because my girlfriend wanted it, and so that is Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I have not watched because I told her I would watch it with her, but it's an Audrey Hepburn movie. I don't know anything about it other than the fact that it's a classic, and hopefully you guys have seen this one. Let me know what you think about Breakfast at Tiffany's. In fact, what's your favorite Audrey Hepburn movie? Do you have any that you would recommend? Again, I don't think I've seen any of her movies, to be honest, but I will be watching this one at some point soon. All right, now that we're done having Breakfast at Tiffany's, let's have breakfast with The Breakfast Club. All right, so The Breakfast Club is actually another movie that my girlfriend recommended, but I have seen this one, and I really dig it. I love the different characters that you have in here, how they're all very unique, and yet they still all have kind of similar angst and similar issues. Especially at the time, it was really cool to see, you know, bringing together all of these people from different walks of life, and, you know, although they do have certain similarities, namely that they are all white, but they all do have different family lives and things like that. So it's kind of cool to see like, hey, we're not all so different despite our upbringings and despite culture and, you know, our hobbies and things like that. So a pretty cool movie. Also has some great classic lines and classic moments. And of course, Emilio Estevez. Who doesn't love him? All right, we are almost done. Just a few more here. Next up on the list is a movie called Bridge to Terabithia. Now, this movie is, man, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a really good movie. It gets you in the feels in ways that you might not expect. So I'll just leave that at that. I won't spoil anything. But you do have a young Josh Hutcherson actually here from Hunger Games. He's in this movie. He's much, much younger, of course. This is a really cool movie. It's like a fantasy made by the same people I think that brought you the Chronicles of Narnia, and it's just like a sweet story with these two young kids, and I don't really want to say much more than that. Definitely a good family movie, something for the kids. I watched this many years ago, and I saw that it was on Blu-ray, so I had to pick it up. All right, next up is another girlfriend recommendation, and that is Brokeback Mountain. I just watched this recently, and I gotta be honest, I think it's definitely a good movie, of course, but it didn't really grab me as much as I thought it would. And I wonder if that's from recently watching The Power of the Dog with Benedict Cumberbatch, and it's although the movies they're not very similar, they involve, you know, a cowboy in a gay relationship, and so I feel like that movie, Power of the Dog, takes that kind of core concept and then does some crazy stuff with it. Whereas this is just a much more straightforward romance with two people. It's kind of like that they can't really be together, but they want to be together. And I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace when I watched it, or if it was because I had watched that other one so recently to it that this one kind of didn't really stick with me. But the performances in this, I will say, are fantastic. Heath Ledger crushes it in this movie. I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal is also really good in it, but his character is a lot less emotionally, I guess, like tumultuous. But Heath Ledger in this is, I mean, transformative. So good in this movie. And also, I guess you should consider the time that this came out. This movie would have been in 2005, which was before gay marriage was legal in America. So pretty progressive at the time. You know, it's easy to like look now and be like, oh, why is it so controversial? But not that long ago, 17 years ago, this was some pretty controversial stuff. So a really important movie, and also a really gorgeously shot movie. Some great cinematography in this one. I believe it was directed by Ang Lee, oddly enough, who prior to this had just done the Incredible Hulk movie, which did not go well, but this won a ton of Academy Awards, including, I believe, for Best Director. So a really good movie, really great performances, really well manufactured, but also kind of a simple movie. So don't expect anything too crazy out of it, I think, is probably the lesson there. Is like, don't expect it to be something like Power of the Dog, where it's also kind of like a thriller. Just expect that it's a simple story about two people that are in love that can't really be together. All right, next up, we've got three more here. Next up on the list is Bruce Almighty, which is, of course, a Jim Carrey joint with Morgan Freeman playing God, because, I mean, who else really should be playing God but Morgan Freeman? This is just a great, silly comedy with so many great quotable lines. Every Jim Carrey movie has a ton of quotable lines, so this is fantastic. I absolutely love that one. And we're gonna power through these last two. Next up is Bumblebee, which is probably my favorite Transformers movie as of late. I like the first Transformers movie. The rest are kind of just a mess for me, but this one was really good. Of course, you have Haley Steinfeld. What's her name? Steinfeld. Haley Steinfeld's in this. John Cena is also pretty good in this one. So just a fun movie, some really cool fight scenes with the robots, and just a sweet story about really Haley Steinfeld's character. I feel like there was a lot of like emotional weight to her character and to, you know, her past and everything that she's been through. So a really good flick. Definitely one of my favorite Transformers movies without a doubt. And then last up on the list is a new release that I just got recently, and that is Brad Pitt in Bullet Train. This movie is awesome. Now, if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, the critics didn't give it great reviews, but I think the fans or the average audience really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It is an action-packed comedy adventure made by, I believe, the same guy who did the John Wick movies, or at least I believe the first one. Either way, this is really, really well done. It's so much fun, all the action sequences. It's really gorgeous. It's a lot of like bright colors. It's, you know, really the definition of a popcorn movie. So don't go into this expecting, you know, the Shawshank Redemption or Citizen Kane or anything like that. But if you're looking to have a good time and watch an action movie, this is the one. This is the most recent hotness that I would recommend you check out. You also have Hiroyuki Sanada, who is, he was in The Last Samurai, he was in The Wolverine, he was in Sunshine, he's been in a ton of stuff, and is a really cool Japanese actor who is also a swordsman, is that the word? Yeah, swordsman. So some really cool scenes with him, being able to utilize his actually like his training and everything. And then of course, Brad Pitt is fantastic. His character in this, Brad Pitt does really good with, I feel like, comedy action from what I've seen of him lately. So it's interesting that he's kind of getting into that later in his life, but he's great in that. Honestly, not a weak link in this movie. The movie does maybe go a little bit long. There's a point towards the end where it feels like it's done, but then there's just a little bit more after that. So if that was, you know, one criticism I could give to it, is that it's a little bit longer than I think it should be. But other than that, absolutely fantastic and gorgeous on 4K. So if you have a 4K player, if you have an OLED TV or anything like that, this is gonna look stunning. And that is it. Those are all of the movies in my collection that start with the letter B. Let me know what movies you think I need to add to this collection. It is ever growing, and as I mentioned before, as I make my way through my entire collection, I will be starting back over again at the beginning, and hopefully then I will have entirely new movies. So I would love to hear any recommendations you have. Let me know in the comments below. And of course, like I mentioned, I'm gonna link to every single one of these Blu-rays in the description, so if you use those links, it massively helps out the channel, and I'd really appreciate that. Otherwise, if you want to see more collection updates, movie reviews, ranking videos, trailer reactions, all that good stuff, well, you gotta subscribe. All right, my dude, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will catch you in the next one. All right, be good.